Hello and welcome. You're watching Newsx and I'm Megha Sharma. Now, tomorrow onwards, Prime Minister Narendra Modi would be on a 3-day visit to United States of America. There have been a number of events that have been lined up for the Prime Minister. Number one, meeting the Prime President of United States of America, Joe Biden, and then of course he has to be part of the Quad Summit, which will include the 4 leaders from United States of America, Australia, Japan, and of course the Prime Minister of our country. And then of course there is the United Nations Summit of the Future that has also been lined up. So let's discuss what is going to be on the agenda during all these 3 massive events. And for the discussion on the telecast with me is Ambassador Suresh Goyal. Thank you very much for joining us. And my first question with regards to what all is going to be on the agenda of the Prime Minister when he meets with his United States counterpart, when he's part of the Quad Summit, and then finally the United Nations Summit of the Future.
Megha, I think we have basically already outlined the most important components of the agenda for the Prime Minister. When you were saying meeting with the US President Joe Biden, the way you started, I thought you would say his good old friend Joe Biden in Delaware, because this is how the meetings between Modi and Biden have been described in the past. And I guess that this will be the meet. And let me go one by one really, and very briefly. The first, the meeting of Quad in Delaware. And I'm going to be very, very honest when speaking on this platform, and that is that for the last several months, bordering over more than years, the way the Quad has come about is there has been a sense that if it is not moribund, it has been drifting from what its main aim was. Now, if you recall that initially when Quad was established, it was supposed to be the platform for security cooperation. Security cooperation, mind you, not military cooperation precisely, but security cooperation in Indo-Pacific. And the 4 most important countries active in the region who were going to play the game together: Australia, Japan, the USA, they all came together really to talk about the security cooperation in the region. Human disaster, etc., came into being. Now, therefore, I think this meeting, Delaware meeting, will be to instill a new life into the pact, into the forum for security, and for Biden being one of the last meetings of Quad, it is going to be a significant one. Bilateral meeting is going to be very important. Both Biden and Prime Minister, and according to my understanding, there will be some agreements lined up to be signed after the meeting, and several critical issues, including the transfer of technology, semiconductors, will be part of the discussions. And another important event really would be the Pact of the Future, United Nations meeting in New York. And significantly, this time the Prime Minister, even though he's in the USA, he will not be addressing the UNGA. That will be done by the External Affairs Minister. But he will be taking part in this single most important meeting of the UN over the last several, or I think 1 decade. This meeting actually reminds me of other meetings which have taken place on the Sustainable Development Goals, before that the Agenda for Peace, laying out the aspirational kind of a framework on where UN should be going. And therefore, that meeting is going to be an important one in terms of the entire UN system coming together to not to just see basically where the UN should be heading or is heading, but to basically see where in terms of the world at the global security and peace. I'm putting the two in a reverse order. Normally we talk about peace and international security. I'm talking about international security and peace here in that order, where they should be going, because the last more than 1 decade has clearly indicated the fragility of the global systems, international system, and the need to have a relook at to make sure that they are sustainable in the international or global peace. Megha.
Okay. All right. Now, after that entire synopsis of the 3-day sojourn of Prime Minister Modi, Professor Madhav Nalapat, how do you view that a Quad summit is now taking place in Delaware, in the home state of President Joe Biden, especially when there had been a proposal that had been made by India to have the Quad summit in January, right at the time of India's Republic Day celebrations?
Well, I'm glad that the Quad summit is taking place in Delaware, because you know the fact of the matter is the Quad is a very, very important association, and frankly, Megha, I have never seen the sense in the Quad being away from military issues, because fundamentally the Quad is a military alliance designed to keep the Indo-Pacific secure from any predatory power. So from that point of view, a Quad meeting is significant, and Prime Minister Modi is acknowledging that by flying all the way to the United States in person, and also to meet with Joe Biden. It's a very courteous gesture to the president, who is going to retire, in January. It's an extremely courteous gesture, and it really reflects Prime Minister Modi's, courtesy and diplomatic, protocol when he's going there to meet Joe Biden, whom he has met several times during these last 10 years. So I think that meeting is very important. The Quad is important. There should be annual summits, and the next summit is going to be in India. So that's important. The second thing is the UN summit. Let's be honest. India is going there as if I may say so, a very key country in the global south. I'm not going to say leader of the global south, because the global south, you don't have leaders. Everybody is equal. But India will be speaking in the UN summit through Prime Minister Modi as the voice of the global south. And that is very important. The global south is increasing its relevance and stature in the future. We have just got reports that some American and other institutions admit that by 2030, India is going to be the third largest economic power in the world, despite the fact that it's being expressed in dollar terms. Nevertheless, not even in PPP. In PPP, we're already third largest. In dollar terms, in a few years, we're going to be a third largest. So the global south has the capacity, and India and the global south coming together, we have the capacity to strengthen each other and to make each other self-reliant, especially in tech. Because don't forget, tech and defense go hand in hand. Tech and manufacturing go hand in hand. And if you're talking about artificial intelligence, people say AI, you lose jobs. But if you go for advanced tech, you gain jobs. So PM Modi is looking for advanced tech, where he gains jobs, and he's looking to spread that tech all across the world. One final point I want to make, I think Donald Trump has been a bit indiscreet in talking about, I'm going to meet Modi and tell him this and that. I think that's been a bit indiscreet. So I'm not surprised that his name is not being mentioned in this particular set of meetings. Maybe there'll be a meeting with him, but I think Trump needs to understand that sometimes silence is golden, and he loves gold. So I think he should be able to understand that very often silence is golden.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. Rubinder, let's hear it from you as well. And of course, Ukraine-Russia war is not going to be off the table. There was a lot of commotion when Prime Minister Modi actually visited Vladimir Putin, and even more talk when he ended up visiting the Ukrainian president just a few weeks ago. Has India played the balancing act here? Is it then going to see a support, a unilateral support of the Americans for India making that visit to Kyiv? How is India going to, at this point in time, tackle the situation amidst, of course, there are a number of reports. In fact, an international media agency coming out and coming out with this quote-unquote exclusive report, which was completely denied by India, about how Indian munition that was exported to Italy was being sent to Ukraine to fight the war against Russia.
Thank you, Megha. Deep questions, but I'll start by saying that those were golden words by Professor Nalapat. when he commented upon, what Trump said. To my mind, I do not think a meeting with Trump can happen unless there is a corresponding meeting with Kamala Harris. I don't think India will do that because, okay, fine, Biden, you're meeting, he's the sitting president. And now, if Prime Minister Modi, yeah, sure, our foreign policy decides, why not? It's always good to be, in touch with, the leader and the leaders. So right now, if there is to be a meeting, it will only and only be if there is a meeting with Kamala Harris also. So, I do think that Trump got ahead of himself, but that's something very different, right? Secondly, now, to the point of the Quad, okay, I think partly what's happening, what Ambassador Goel was saying and Professor Nalapata saying is that Quad's security role, to some extent, I think in American calculus, is being now, let's say, is now playing out with the AUKUS. The AUKUS is a military fighting alliance that the US is building up. So that's one development happening in the Asia Pacific. Second, in the last couple of years, America has made some changes of paradigm of its own in the Indo-Pacific, in the sense that they're expanding now small bases. They've taken up 4 more bases in Philippines in the last few months. They're identifying small islands, where to position their marines, the radars, the communication, whatever, etc. So that in the case of a quote-unquote conflict, they would have distributed assets which can be agile and react. So I think those are 2, developments on the military side which are happening. But at the same time, yes, the Quad is extremely important and will be deliberating. The whole idea of supply chains, green technology or green energy, and integrating the regional economy, along with, by the way, remember, technology and, even more important, standards. The war of tomorrow, it's not only about technology, right, that you have the better technology, but it's about what standard you are creating, and that standard is being adopted by as many nations as possible. That is the dominance you want, right? Now, thirdly, with regards to Ukraine and Russia, I do think Prime Minister Modi would talk. To my mind, Indian foreign policy has changed gears in Prime Minister's 3rd term starting. Indian foreign policy seems to me has decided that it will now go aggressive. It will play a proactive role. It will no longer say, we will be there to help you do it. That's what the Prime Minister said is with Zelensky. So to my mind, the visit with Putin, with Zelensky, I view it in that sense. And to my mind, I call it Modi's single point peace plan.
Okay.
Zelensky has a 10-point plan. She has a 12-point plan. The basic single point needed is peace and cessation of war right now. So I would say Modi's single point peace program, they would also discuss. Biden and Modi and in the Quad.
Okay. Pathikrit, how do you view the situation in terms of what Robinder Sachdev said, that, India has taken a very aggressive stance, not just in the 3rd term. It started off from the 1st term itself, and it is only growing as years pass by. And this was something that was very visible when just recently there was a comment made once again by External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar when he was questioned about BRICS, the grouping, and he spoke about how the G7 nations would not let anyone in, and therefore India and other countries in the global south decided to create their own club.
So, Megha, I am not trying to play the role of devil's advocate, but let me tell you, there are certain realities I want to reflect upon. Number one, I look at these meetings as work in progress. I don't have too much expectations. Number two, let's accept there are a lot of underlying tensions right now. Okay, there are issues of regime change, which India is extremely unhappy about what has been done in Bangladesh. I think no one of us has any doubt about who has been behind it. Number two, when it comes to defense deals, the type of deliberate delay that General Electric is doing is actually like sabotaging India's prime combat jet program, which is the LCA Tejas Mark 1. Number three, on one hand, they would say that please have more defense deals, and when we give them, they delay it. There are 6 Apache helicopters which were given contract for in 2020. If we are on the verge of ending 2024, they have not been able to deliver those 6 even today. Then there are issues of Gaza and Ukraine. None of the conflicts America is in control of. They absolutely have no idea where these are heading, and those are creating supply chain disruptions. There have been some rash comments which have been made by American ambassadors here and other elements. Literally like saying that don't take US-India relation for granted. So I think that, and of course what you mentioned, I think there is an assertion coming. I think somewhere it is now important for India, while keeping the diplomatic nuances in place, to be a little more assertive towards United States. We cannot just be the second fiddle all the time. There are major apprehensions, even today as we are doing this discussion, that another round of internal problem can be created for the sake of regime change, and it is around the corner. So let's understand, this relationship is very important, but this relationship cannot be taken forward with a gun at the head concept. United States would have to understand India's concern as well. Also, the amount of weapon systems Americans left in Afghanistan now getting shipped to Kashmir. The terrorists are using M4 assault rifles and armor-piercing steel bullets, which is resulting in high casualties of Indian Army personnel. So even though those things, and let me tell you this, Quad has absolutely no control on what is happening in Indo-Pacific region. And that is the reason India, while having these exercises, is putting a lot of effort to bolster its own Navy. On one hand, we talk about Quad. On the other hand, AUKUS happened. In case of AUKUS into Australia, which was told to do away with a deal with France for submarines, America came in for its own submarine, and now there is a clause, let me tell you. The clause says if there are eventualities, they might do away with that entire agreement for supplying submarines to Australia in case an emergency arises where the US would need those submarines for itself. So please understand, when it comes to Quad, there are a lot of underlying tensions.
Yeah.
When it comes to issues of defense, there are underlying tensions. Yes, defense deals would happen, investments do happen, but there is this dual diplomatic approach that United States has, wherein Defense Department does these deals, and the State Department has an absolutely different approach when it comes to interfering in internal affairs of other countries. And we have been witnessing this.
Okay.
There are apprehensions about the countries which are behind what is happening in Manipur. So let me tell you, you would have lots of handshakes, but a lot of things will be discussed in those meetings, which may not be extremely polite. Of course, those will not come outside, but it's important those things, messages are given, and I'm sure this time this will be given.
Okay. Okay. Ambassador Goyal, then can compromise be struck where, while on one hand there may be conflicts in the way you look at things, the way your ideologies function, your self-interest, whether you're living in India or for that matter in America or some part of Europe, or in Southeast Asia, you are, however, in sync with other things, whether it is about defense pacts being signed or technological prowess that is at this point of time being brought together for India and America. Can those two things exist simultaneously on the same platform?
Megha, I think
no salt, no oil anywhere.
And I don't think I can talk with the line talking to. Okay, thank you. He has now gone mute. Okay, Megha, thank you very much. Now, what you have asked me is something which is taught to us all diplomats, is foreign policy 101. The problem is that even after retirement, we are not independent analysts like Pathikrit is. And therefore, I really compliment Pathikrit that he has been able to put the whole situation in a very honest and disassociated manner, objective manner, which only he can do. And I can't do it even if I want to, simply because there are certain limitations on my free speech, even after I retired. Now, coming to the issue that you have put. See, in any relationship, you develop the relationship by developing dependencies. No country is absolutely independent in its decision making. One thing, we talk about the United Nations. The United Nations itself is a pact amongst independent countries which invest their part of their sovereignties in a common agreement for the global peace and security. And you look at all the clauses, they all act together, but not completely in a sovereign manner. Therefore, let us not maintain the fiction of a country being able to completely act independently, yes, in their national interests, yes, but when they're defining what their national interests are and where they go, and Quad is an example of why did we join Quad after all? For us, again, basically security in our maritime region was a prime deriving factor to come together in this Quad really, even though Professor Nalpa says it's a military pact. It is not a military pact, it's a security pact. US has been driving to make military cooperation part of it, but we have not agreed to it. And that's the reason AUKUS came about, for the military cooperation in the region and military challenge to China. Now, the fact is that Indo-Pacific is a critical region where China is displaying all its aggressive, I'm not even using the word assertive. China is being very, very aggressive in terms of defining a role for itself as a global power. So we and China is our neighbor, both continental and in the maritime region. We face the challenges all the time in the Andaman, in the Bay of Bengal, Arab Sea, Djibouti port. Therefore, let us face it, that we need to develop our dependencies.
Okay.
Now, we'll also look at our relations in terms of dependencies and where we can work together in terms of our own national interest. Do we have any options except the USA? After the breakup of Soviet Union in 1991 at the end of the Cold War, where did we had dependency on the Soviet Union in terms of defining our strategic also security matrices. Does it exist anymore? No, it does not. Russia is getting closer to China every day for whatever reasons. So therefore, let us look at what are the options we have. And we can work only in terms of what are the available options. We are not living in an ideal world. The heavens are not going to come and save us from anything. We need to develop those plans. We need to develop those links ourselves. And I think given those links, even though India-US relationship is not an ideal relationship, there are challenges. And we know the recent developments.
Yes.
The US ambassador, when he spoke, we know what the US ambassador has been doing in terms of Pannoon and Lisa. We know all that. We are not blind. But the point is that we have to manage all these criticalities.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Professor Madhav Nalapat, I'm going to just veer off the subject, and particularly when a decision such as this is made, where the government of India and the Minister of External Affairs decides that the Prime Minister is not going to be addressing the UNGA but take part in the other activities, particularly the United Nations Summit of the Future. Could there be eyebrows raised over such a decision made?
Not really, Megha, because there's nothing more important in the future. And may I point out that tech is intimately tied to defense. And if I may volunteer a suggestion, I think there should be much more cooperation between India and the US on fusion. The Chinese are moving very fast in fusion. If they succeed in nuclear fusion, then you can get an unlimited source of energy at very low cost. You can power entire cities at 1/20th the price that we are paying now for electric power. So nuclear fusion is very important. The Americans, frankly, have been blocking India till now, but the reality is they need Indian talent and we also need American tech. So this combination, and that combination is present in many Indian Americans and many Indians working in the tech sector in the US. Fusion energy, in my view, is a subject that I think the Prime Minister will touch upon, because nuclear cooperation and fusion, whichever set of countries breaks the fusion code first, is going to be a very lucky set of countries indeed, because you'll have unlimited and cheap power. So fusion energy in the nuclear field, Megha, is what I think among the issues the PM will be discussing. Thank you.
Okay. Rupinder Sachdev, again, what could be expected besides talking about technology, besides talking about cyber securities, besides talking about fusion technology? What other things could make the basis of Prime Minister's speech at the United Nations? Talking about especially the two issues that are repeatedly brought forth in terms of the resolutions that are passed is about the Ukraine-Russia war and the Israel-Gaza conflict that the world faces?
Sure, Megha, thank you very much. Yeah, I'll get into that, but I wanted to continue on what Professor Nalapat said. Professor Nalapat, I'm thankful to Sunday Guardian when I think in 2015 or 16 PM Modi went, I wrote an article on thorium cooperation between the US and India, which was carried in the front page of your newspaper, sir.
Correct.
Okay, I've been arguing for it. I mean, thorium, we have the supply, if we have the technology, we'll be this quote unquote Saudi Arabia of the new energy. So there is, but somehow within the US, there is a lobby, quote unquote, or a school, whatever, which is not allowing, progress on that front. Here, meanwhile, the Russians are also leading. I mean, the Russians are also advanced and we are advanced. Americans are not so advanced. But America has, huge testing ranges, dark ranges in Nevada and all, where these things could be tested out. So India and the US could collaborate to achieve that. I mean, I'm really surprised. Oftentimes I'm arguing whenever I get a chance. So this is another chance thanks to you right now. And 7 years ago, whatever I've been pushing for thorium. Now, back to Megha, your question. See, the summit of the future, I think perhaps will not address specifically the Ukraine or Gaza conflict. I may be wrong. I think the way the summit is structured is that it's going to end up apparently in an intergovernmental agreement on, the sustainable SDG goals, on infrastructure financing, on development, probably these things, and of course, definitely about global peace. So in that sense, maybe whatever they can bring in, but that's a summit of the future. To your other question about why PM is maybe not, giving or talking when India is talking, I think one reason could be this summit is on what, 23rd? The slot for India to speak at the UNGA, because it happens per a certain roster, is maybe on the 25th or 26th. So I don't think the Prime Minister can stay on for 2 more days just for that one speaking thing, which is not necessary as such, right? So therefore, I think that could be the reason why PM is not addressing the UNGA.
Okay.
This summit is more important, and between the summit and the UNGA slot for us, that time is kind of not justified for the Prime Minister's stay over.
Okay. Particularly then, quickly concluding this, but a very important aspect of, a very important highlight of this 3-day trip of Prime Minister Narendra Modi is going to be, of course, the farewell that he is going to accord to President Biden. One way or the other, he will no longer be the President of the United States of America.
Well, I don't know how important that is for us. Nobody is going to shed too much tears because Biden is retiring. Not even the Americans. But let me tell you one important reason why Prime Minister is going. In this era, narrative war is very important. Now, there are some people from India going abroad, going to the United States, playing to a particular lobby, abusing India, criticizing India, trying to show that 90% people in India have nothing to do with the growth story. Nobody is benefiting. So it is important for the Prime Minister, who has worked very hard in the last 10 years, go there and show the true picture, real picture about how India progressed from fragile 5 to major 5 economies of the world. On the Biden issue, I have nothing against Biden personally. I'm nobody. The only thing I want to say is this. President Biden had very good relations with Prime Minister Modi at an individual level. But when it comes to the State Department, unfortunately, there has been tensions. What I'm trying to tell you is this. The relationship between United States and India is a natural relationship. It should thrive. It should grow. But at the same time, when you have development and progress happening on one side, at the same time, you're constantly worried about the same government doing some interference and regime change games in your country or your backyard, it creates tension. It creates problems. And it is important for both countries, especially United States, if it considers India as a great partner, that they should somewhere put a lid to that. There are certain excited lobbies, excited people trying to do that. It is not going to help because it is in the interest of United States to have a strong, stable, democratic India in their favor.
Yeah.
To create democratic problems in India, I don't think it's going to be good for anybody in the world. Back to you.
Okay, all right. I thank all of you for joining me on the telecast and sharing your views. On that note, let's keep an eye on all that is going to happen in the next 3 days. The Prime Minister is going to be arriving in United States of America. He will be in Delaware to meet President Biden, and of course, a flurry of activities that are going to kick off tomorrow onwards. So stay tuned on Newsx for all those updates, and thanks for watching.